Warm greetings and welcome to today's edition of the African Leadership Group, the Nigerian Leadership Series. My name is Itwa Igodalo, and I'm really pleased to be here with you this afternoon to go through the challenges of Nigeria, the good and the not so good things that we're going through, and our hopes and expectations for the future. We have today a very exciting gentleman who will be speaking to us about prosperity. Can we afford it? It's very interesting caption. Can we afford prosperity? Do we have enough to make sure that we prosper, and so on and so forth? How do we make prosperity to come to pass in this, our great and wonderful country called Nigeria? Our guest has 25 years experience in consulting and financial services and is currently the Chief Executive Officer of Sterling Bank. If I say that that's the best bank in Africa, you will not be able to defend it because I have slightly vested interest in the bank. Okay, he holds a bachelor's degree in economics from the University of Abuja and a Master of Science in Major Program Management from the University of Oxford. He previously worked as tax advisor at Arthur Andersen and financial markets with Citibank. He's a firm believer in the role of efficient markets, emerging technologies, small businesses in unlocking productivity, improving national competitiveness, and driving inclusive economic growth. He currently serves on the advisory boards of the Lagos Business School and the Enterprise Development Center of the Pan-Atlantic University. Please welcome with me Mr. Abubakar Suman, MD Sterling Bank Limited. Abu, you are most welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for agreeing to be on the program today. And thank you for taking the time out. We have chosen the topic, or we're looking at the topic, prosperity. Can we afford it? Maybe from your own perspective and from your own point of view, you can give us a quick snapshot, a synopsis of Nigeria as you see it, the trajectory that we've been through, and where you think we are at this point in time.
Thank you very much. It's always interesting when we try to reflect on Nigeria and to take a position. The positions you are going to hear has varied as the number of people you meet, and it's understandable. But what I say to people, especially people in my generation and those that are younger, when we complain about Nigeria, is that I remind them that there was a generation before us that lived through the years of dictatorship, the generation that lived under military rule. I saw part of that, and I remember things to do that I've never considered living outside Nigeria until Abacha became president, and some of the things that I saw and witnessed, I actually considered getting a resident permit in Ghana. I didn't. I still continue to remain 100% Nigerian because I think that this country is moving forward. Why am I starting with that? Because again, the generation that handed today's Nigeria to us, in some way, they fought for democracy. They had to fight a dictatorship where even this event that we're having today, it wasn't something that we could necessarily have without being censored or without giving some assurances that we will not speak openly and freely. And so that generation would argue that they've given us democracy and it's not left for us to make something more out of democracy. And then you go back further before that and you see that there was a generation that came from civil war that had to fight a war to keep this country together. And as far as they're concerned, they were able to keep Nigeria together and give us the chance to make something out of Nigeria. And those generations would also say to you that before that, there was a generation before them that fought to gain independence In other words, the right to exist as a citizen of this country without reporting to the Queen of England, which is something we take for granted today. There was a generation that fought for that. And then, of course, before that, there was a generation that fought slavery. So every generation has had to fight a battle to move this country forward. And if you think carefully about it, they all left Nigeria better. No matter how you feel about where we are today, there is nobody that can tell you that we would rather be where we were in 1998. And if you, no matter what you think about 1998, if you go back to 1968, when this country was at war, you would understand that even the military rule was a step away from war. And then, of course, you go back to colonial rule. So my point is that this journey has started. We can have a lot of debate about how fast we should be going. And I think most people will agree that Nigeria should be going faster. But there is no doubt in my mind that when you step back and you look at a lifetime, the country is headed in the direction I would all like to see. I may have lost you. I think you might be muted.
Thank you so much. It's a very fresh and interesting perspective because very, very precise generation that fought slavery. No, I'm not muted. Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
What's his name? 5 years muted. You can't hear me and I'm not. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you. I'm not sure if
okay,
the rest...
I'm so sorry about that. But technology.
Recording in progress.
Seguidado, I'm not sure if it is from my end, but I cannot hear you. Can anyone else in the room confirm if they can hear the host?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Yes, technology. You know, a lot of people complain about technology, but I don't complain about technology. You know, some people are complaining. I called and called, I couldn't get through. I said there was a time in Nigeria where to make an international call, you have to go and line up in NITEL. So the fact that you can call your mechanic or call your driver, I think we've come really fast. So I don't complain at all. I'm just thankful that you can call after a few drops and so on and so forth. Yeah, so I was saying that your analogy of generational building or generational build of Nigeria is very interesting. It's a fresh perspective. Generation that fought slave trade, generation that fought for independence, generation that fought in the Civil War, generation that fought the military and brought back democracy in 2 stages. And now the present generation that's trying to make something out of our present circumstances. But the challenge and the pain that a lot of Nigerians are feeling is that when I went to England for the first time in 1978, the naira was equal to the pound and much more superior to the dollar. Okay, today you're a banker. We are having a naira at 1,000 naira, being equivalent to almost $1, you know, and so on and so forth. And some people still argue that what 1,000 naira can do for you in Nigeria, $1 cannot do for you in the US. Okay, 1,000 naira, you can have a meal in Nigeria, maybe 500 naira, 600 naira. You can do a few things, but I'm not sure $1 can buy you Kentucky in the US. Okay, so some people say there's something not quite right about those fundamentals. Not only that, and unemployment is extremely high in a country that's swimming with natural resource and so on and so forth. So even though they fought for democracy, the expectation in terms of quality of governance is far below what we have. I don't know what your comment on that is.
I mean, you're spot on. First, on your comment around technology, that also speaks to the necessity of stepping back if you want to measure progress. It's very important to do that. The moment we don't step back and we stand in the middle of it, we cannot see progress anymore. And what we are fighting are just temporary issues that don't lead to progress. But coming back to whether or not this economy has delivered to the common man, I would go back further to say that when you have a democracy of a population of 200 million, and potentially you could have, anywhere between 50 to 80 million of those people qualified to vote, and you can't get 20 million people out to vote, there is a failure. There is significant failure of participation. And so what we are having is might end up becoming what you call a democracy of minority. Because if you've got a government that was voted in place by less than 10 million people in our kind of population, the failure itself is that we have not stepped out to ensure that the government that actually gets into power represents the will of the majority. That's a significant failure. So you've moved from military rule, you now have the right to vote. And I know that in some cases it's not easy to vote because the circumstances are made difficult deliberately. But until we fight the battle to vote, that democracy itself is not a comprehensive democracy. It is a democracy of the minority. And sometimes, painfully, the minority are the least informed. The minority that participate actively in politics are the least informed about what the country ought to be focused on. And so it's very easy to motivate them to vote for the wrong candidate. So the next battle for my generation is to make sure that we don't have 30% of the registered voters coming out. We have 50, 60, 80% of registered voters. That way, we begin to get the political leadership that represents the majority of the people. And nobody is going to do that for us. We have to do that. That has to be the fight that we fight in my generation so that the next generation will get better government. As for exchange rate itself, there's something we forget. Obviously, no, we have not managed our resources well. And it's not even our mineral resources that we've mismanaged the most. It's our human resources. It is the way we have failed to invest in our human resources that is now translating into the difficulties we face. If you go back to the 70s and the early 80s, and where you had a very limited number of our population who can access what I would call the international market for goods and services, it's very easy for us to be able to fund them, even though we hadn't built the capacity to export beyond oil. But everybody became aware that there was a better life in the city. And as we all migrated to the city, obviously it was no longer possible for the proceeds from oil to fund us. We collectively as an economy, we have failed to become productive. We put in the same number of hours as the UK economy, for instance, per person. We even work longer hours, but the productivity per person is a fraction of that because, one, we have not yet invested in the people. They don't have the skill set. Obviously, we've not invested in the infrastructure. And so when you combine poor human resource skills with poor infrastructure, then your productivity is very low. And at that point, you become dependent on importing from other places. So I do agree. It is primarily a government failure, but the government is failing because the government is not as representative as it ought to be because we haven't mobilized ourselves to go out and vote. Most of us will not even consider joining a political party. We see that as if it is beneath us. Well, the majority of the members of people in political parties today are the people making decisions as to who become our leaders. And we need to question ourselves, even as to question the government.
So this is very interesting, Wally. This is very interesting. And then I must therefore ask you what you think we can do to get the majority to vote. And also not just getting them to vote, to get them to be enlightened voters, because Fola Diola, one of my boss, was discussing with me many, many years ago, how a bunch of area boys stopped him, I think, in front of International Affairs or Metropolitan Club in VI, and they were complaining about the economy. And he turned to them and said, it's the people you voted in And they turned to him and said, they don't know anything about that. It's who they told them to vote for that they voted for. So it's not just the quantum, it's also the knowledge base of these people. How do we ramp up? Or how do you think it is possible for us to ramp up? Please note that a lot of people have been talking about the weaponization of illiteracy, the weaponization of poverty, deliberate attempts by the present ruling class or the previous ruling class to make sure that most of these people don't really have a voice. And you also mentioned the fact that some of them are not even able to vote. What do we do? What does the common Nigerian do? What do I do? What do you do? What does Asperime do? What do we do? What do the people on this platform do to try and get common people to vote?
Okay, I mean, it's a valid question as to whether or not, even if we get a majority of the voters out, they would actually vote for the right candidate. But what we do know is that when we get everybody out, the conversations will be very robust and we will have an opportunity to actually communicate with them. If they don't come out at all, the opportunity to engage them is zero. More importantly, right now, we have far more people who are ill-informed coming out to vote when compared to those who actually know what they ought to be doing. And if you stretch that further, I have bifurcated the Nigerian elites into those who have opted for state capture, whether they are inside or outside government, and their objective is to ensure that they determine who rules Nigeria. And there are those who have opted for social media capture, and the objective is to have a word and comment about everything, but it doesn't translate. There are a lot of us, a huge number of Nigerians that have influence that can begin to participate in politics. We have seen a lot of, I mean, you mentioned Fola Adeola. He once came out and participated in politics. He contested an election in this country. We are seeing more and more of such people coming out, people who have pedigree, who have achieved something. They come out now to vote. And because of that, those who look up to them start to participate. So I do believe that we are filling in our role. The shortest way to get everybody out to vote, obviously, is to push for a legislation that makes voting mandatory. And that would be great. I wish that we could do that. But in the absence of that, I remember a couple of years ago as a CEO, I gave every single person in the company a day off to make sure they go back home or stay at home on that day and get registered, because it was very difficult for them to register at weekend. It's a small thing to do, but there are thousands of us who can do the same thing, and we begin to change the conversation. The ability to come and sort of have this conversation and listen to other people and exchange views, these are the things that we must all do. But I think pushing for legislation to improve the voter turnout is absolutely important. I think we can do it. There's nothing stopping us from doing it if we put our mind to it. And of course, we should also join partisan politics. We should join political parties. I've done that before, and I don't think there's anything wrong with a professional having a political view or being in a political party.
Okay, so that's very, very interesting. And I'm hoping that a lot of us on the platform are listening and wanting to throw in our hearts. But it's a tough thing, because the way politics is now, it doesn't allow for any form of decency or any form of good mannerisms or righteousness and all that. It's a winner take all. You snatch it, you grab it, you do whatever it is, and you run with it. That's the attitude, that's the mentality that we're faced with. So if you are thinking of competing fairly and competing equitably, you're almost wasting your time. Not only that, the resource that is required to do this thing, both legal campaign and underhand activities to push yourself forward, is almost unattainable for the man who has worked judiciously hard all his or her life. What's your response to that? I mean, if you were a civil servant, for example, and you were earning civil service salary, 250,000, 500,000, maybe 1 million a month, okay, you retire at the age of 55 or whatever. How much money could you have saved or gathered to now begin to run for any serious political office Or how much effort would you do running around various family and friends and relatives to raise money for you? Would you not now be at the behest of yet another godfather who most likely has generated this resource from questionable sources? You know, if you know the amount of money that exchanged hands, I'm told, in this last political exercise, it's mind-boggling. You know, how is that going to make room for people like myself? I'm a pastor. I want to go into politics. How am I going to afford it?
Well, I actually believe that you are already in politics if you're a pastor. And the reason is that you have a podium, you have people who trust you, who believe in you, people that you can influence. I also do not believe that getting into politics necessarily means that you must win the political election and become the candidate. I think there are ways that you start to have influence on those who are already in politics because you have organized yourself. And so, for instance, it is known that a lot of people who came together and offered their support, and in return, they make certain demands and say, well, we cannot change everything in government, but if we go to government, these are the things that we're asking for. And because the politician desires to win and to avoid confrontation as much as possible, they would negotiate if you don't ask for too much. And sometimes that's where you start. So I agree that it's very difficult today to completely replace the existing political order, but I do not agree that there isn't something we can do. It's about influence and how you negotiate that influence, you know, for the progress that you want to see. The second point for me would be that if we spend half the time that we spend today discussing what politicians should or should not do, and we spend that amount of time just simply coming together, aggregating our voices under an umbrella, whether it is a partisan or non-partisan umbrella, the politicians would actually start to make changes. Maybe not as fast as we want, but they will start to make changes. But more importantly, when I was crafting and thinking through this conversation and the title, the question that came to me was that prosperity comes at a cost. There is not a single country in the world today that has prospered and didn't pay a price. And you have to understand how that price is paid. Recently in a conversation with a friend, and he was on and on about Rwanda. And I asked him that if somebody gave you an option today to go through what Rwanda went through so that you can have what Rwanda has now, would you take it? And the answer is no. Not only would you not accept to go through a genocide that created the environment, you will also not agree to live under a government where you don't think you have the full right that you would like to exercise. Right. So whether or not they have become economically prosperous is a different thing. And you can go on country to country. Or Singapore, they were on the verge of extinction and they got lucky. The same way Pol Pot, was a disaster. Lee Kuan Yew was a success, but both could have gone either way. That's a bet. You throw your dice and hope that you get the score that you want. We talk about Saudi Arabia, where they are getting one of the, I guess, most transformative leadership today. But you have to understand the history of Saudi Arabia and ask yourself if you would want to live in a country where a single family has this level of control and dominance. So every single country that is prosperous pays the price. I have classified the prices into two broad categories. One is the price of time. Countries become what they become over time. When you look at India today, over 3,500 years old. When you look at China, more 4,000 and beyond. Even Ethiopia, in its current form, is over 1,000 years old. This is the price of time. It takes time to form. It takes time to become a single people. That doesn't happen overnight. The second price you can pay is the price of inequality. When you look at the other set of countries that have become prosperous over a period of time, there has to be some form of power inequality. There has to be some form of resource inequality. There has to be some sort of people giving up their will to participate equally for others to lead. And that is a story of, if it is power inequality in a place like Singapore, where the very small elite control power and use it for the good of the people, or you go into places where there's resource inequality, where a few people become wealthy and on the back of their wealth, they build the economic base of the country. And you have to make a choice. And again, if you move away from those that have suffered to become prosperous, you could also go to those that have cheated to become prosperous. I mean, for instance, if you think about what the United Kingdom did to become what it is today, Do I want to carry the burden of that price? Do I want to carry the burden of what was effectively a murderous rage across the world, that a lot of acts of genocide, reported and confirmed acts of genocide and theft of other people's resources? I don't want that. Do I want to live in a country where the indigents live in reservations and those who have come into the country are the ones who control the resources? No, those are prices to be paid. So when you look at that and you look at relatively the price that Nigeria is paying for the progress we're making, it's not as bad as we think that it is. Obviously, we deserve to be better. But when you choose a model of leadership that requires that people participate in the way that we've done, it is going to be complex, it's going to be difficult, especially, and this is a very important point, in a country where we have so many balancing forces, so many voices that cancel out each other, whether it is because we are regionally diverse and balanced, or because we are religiously diverse and balanced, it is very difficult for any one person to take charge and pull us forward against our will. It has to be by collectivism, by agreeing, by negotiating. Negotiation comes at a price. And are we willing to pay the price? That is the question of today. What price are we willing to pay? Because prosperity is available to us. It could be the price of time, which is important, and I think is usually the way that most people think about it, or it could be that we are set a level of inequality where we get we have less friction, but we have less representation. And that is what has happened on all the countries that we've seen progress with of recent have had to give up some level of freedom to be able to move as quickly as they've moved. And I doubt that most Nigerians are interested in giving up 1 inch of freedom.
So what do you think is going to happen, and how do you think Nigeria is going to get its progress? And what sort of price do you think we should be prepared or expecting to pay if you sort of had a throw forward or had a crystal ball?
I'm an optimist, and so I'm going to tell you what I hope will happen, and then maybe I can backtrack a little bit to what might end up happening. I genuinely believe that as the center becomes weaker because they're losing trust, because they no longer have as much resources, because we no longer have as much alignment, they will have no choice but to begin to strengthen the path, the components. And this is not just about the federal government becoming weaker and strengthening the states. It's also the state themselves becoming weaker and realizing that they have to strengthen the local government. But it's also about communities becoming stronger because they no longer can rely on the government. I was recently analyzing the sectors where I think Nigeria is going to dominate in Africa, because somebody spoke about how, Rwanda was becoming the Singapore, and I think another country, I believe, was, and I like, well, I hear you, but Nigeria has become the California of Africa. Nigeria is going to dominate this continent in the creative arts, in movies, in music, in fashion, in food. Nigeria has got that covered, and it was done without government, right? You move away from there and you see Nigeria has also become the Silicon Valley of Africa. Maybe it's early stages, but I have no doubt in my mind that the Nigerian entrepreneurs in the tech sector are going to dominate in Africa, right? And then you move away from that and you say, which other sector has Nigeria done very well? We are seeing, I think, for instance, as far as diaspora flow is concerned, Nigeria is building up to become a very strong destination for diaspora flow, because the people that we have trained with our national resources are now in other countries and they're going to reinvest in the continent. So there are things happening in Nigeria outside government, but most importantly, Nigeria is going to move forward because the center will continue to become weaker. Even if they had resources, they no longer have the trust of the people. People no longer trust them the way they used to. And that means that they have no choice but to collaborate with the states and empower the states. They are closer to the people. So for me, that's how Nigeria survives, especially because when you've got 36 states, they could very easily become competing states where every state is trying to do better than the other. I'm seeing early signs of states beginning to think, I need to be better than the other state, and that's a very, very good sign. So Nigeria will move away from here because suddenly the resources in the center is not so much as to drag everyone's attention. People start to focus on the components and start to pull it forward. And I think that is going to happen. Now, as for the process for that happening, I think we've already divested power to the state far more than in the last 3 years, more than we did in the previous 30 years. So we've seen, the changes that have happened in power generation. We've seen the changes that have happened in, the rights of the state, even in terms of trying to give a lot more independence to the component part, whether the state assembly or the local government. There's evidence that that is a direction of thought, a direction of travel. And for me, that is how we get this country out of here, when everybody is not trooping to Abuja and somehow expecting some miracle leader to pull the entire country out of poverty.
Can you hazard what just, do you think you can encourage me and hazard a time frame?
So the nature of our progress, as you can see from the timeline that we've laid out, it's that there are different things being effectively resolved by different generations. I think our generation is the one that decentralizes authority in Nigeria. I think if there was one thing we could all do, is to collectively focus on ensuring that there's more power, more authority, and more accountability at the state level, so that we can weaken the center, not necessarily by taking away from them, but by growing more at the state. I think that would be a great gift from my generation. In addition, obviously, to political participation. Democracy is of no use if you don't participate in it. It's a bit like, the story of someone who can read but does not read. You can vote, you do not vote, you do not have democracy. The democracy you see today is the democracy of those who choose to participate anyway, despite the imperfection. The rest of us are still living in a dictatorship because we don't participate in the democratic process. We have no right. We cannot exercise any right because the people that could have represented us do not have our support. They don't get our support because we're on social media and WhatsApp shouting. They get our support when we go out into the polling booth and we cast our vote, and we, as much as possible, defend our vote. We can put enough pressure on the system to improve the participation at the electoral process. But if we don't put that pressure, if we give up and say, oh, it won't count. I mean, one of the smartest things that I heard at the last election was that if votes didn't count, politicians wouldn't buy them. There was clarity. Why would they pay for it if they know? It means if they are paying for votes, it means votes can count. And therefore, what we need to do is to put the sheer number of positive votes to cancel out those that have purchased. Votes count, but they count only if we vote in the right number. At the current level of participation, it is very easy for the votes to be for the election to be bought.
Well, I think it's going to be easy for quite a while for the elections to be bought because of the level of poverty that we have presently. Even you'll be surprised among those who you'd expect to have some reasonable level of comfort, they seem to have a price, and prices that are irresistible. I can't name names or mention statistics here. But millions of dollars, I'm told, were exchanged in the last exercise to very, very serious people, or people you think were very, very serious. So I think it's a question of the highest bidder or the biggest price to be paid, which continues to make the electoral process burdensome and difficult for an average man to get into. What do you think? What are your thoughts on this, and what's your response to it?
So my view is that you're right, and strangely, it's not different from many of the popular democracies around the world. The mode of settlement might differ. You've been paying attention to the process in the US. How many senior senators and political office holders have been brought to justice for corrupt practices, or when you look at the industries that influence election in the US. So there is always going to be that element. Power is that attractive. The question is, how do we nullify that power? How do we nullify it? The first part of it is cheap and free and easy. Get into the election. That part, nobody has to stop us. Nobody. There are millions of Nigerians who know the right thing to do and will vote for the right candidate that do not vote. That's our biggest setback. That is our failure. I was almost going to call it a crime. It's a crime against the poor people, for those who know the right thing, not to go out and vote so that we can change outcomes because they are comfortable. The second part of it, and I think is where we underestimate our power, is that with every person that we add into the good vote, the cost of the bad vote becomes higher. They need to buy more. With every number, every time we increase, they have to continue to increase that. And there's a point that they will break because there is not enough resources to continue in perpetuity. So we have to bet on the fact that there is a tipping point where even all of their effort will no longer be sufficient. We make the election buying so much more expensive that they might still buy some successfully, but they will lose a lot. And with every time they lose, it gives us more confidence. So if we plan to win election, or there's an election next month, let's all go out and vote, we're not going to make an impact. There's an election in 2031. I'm not even interested in 2027 as I am interested in 2031, because the level of preparation you need to change the outcome of an election requires time. All those who have come and won election in the last couple of elections, any way you look at it, they put the time into it. And we have to learn to put time as opposed to expecting that we can get. The fact that you are right doesn't mean you're not going to have to sweat. You're still going to have to work hard. You're still going to have to sacrifice. It's down to, again, and this is to those of us who genuinely want to see this country be better. Are we willing to make the sacrifice? Are we willing to make the sacrifice? Because far often than not, it is our unwillingness to sacrifice that makes it easier for those who steal the country from us.
Okay, so thanks. Apart from time, and maybe money, what other sacrifices do you think we need to make as individuals and collectively in Nigeria to pay for this prosperity? Can we afford it? What are your other thoughts on this subject matter?
Well, the answer to that headline question is that can we afford not to? Right? The real answer is that it's another question, which is can we afford not to? Because if we do not become prosperous as a country in a very short period of time, we will not have a country. The country cannot take this amount of suffering. We are adding 5 million plus people to this population every year. If we don't do something, we're not going to be here much longer. Now, what other sacrifices? I think, for instance, that I have this concept of rebuilding the social fabric, that we need to step back and start to rebuild the people around us that we can help, but do it in a structured way so that we start to have influence in their decision-making. So even though we may not pay them to vote, they know that we have their best interests at heart because we've been there for them. We have to build that, what they call grassroots support or grassroots. It is about the people who will vote believing that you will act in their best interest. That would mean that they might still collect money from the politicians, but many of them will go in there and vote their conscience. So we have to build that. I mean, you have a podium. You, beyond ministering to people's souls, you're also ministering to their worldly understanding of, so that they can act better. I have a podium. The people that work with me, hopefully by the way I carry myself and demonstrate my commitments, some of them would also. So it's amazing how much you can do when you decide to take the right sizing and deal with it. And I think that's something we can do. The other part of it is that we are far more technologically capable than those that we seek to unseat. And we must leverage that. We must leverage that technology so that the thought this divided house, everybody going their separate way, is never going to make a dent. At some point, technology should bring us all together so that we have a strong voice. And in many cases, we don't have to remove them. We just have to change their behavior. We just have to motivate the right behavior because we cannot all become politicians. Once you constitute a powerful bloc, they start to make the changes that are most critical. And sometimes that is all you need, because it's not that we want to leave our jobs and our calling and become politicians. We don't want that, but we will be forced to do that if the changes don't happen. But if they see that we constitute a powerful bloc, they will start to make some of the changes that we hope for. That's also a pathway to change.
Okay. We're soon going to be taking some questions from the platform. A few hands are already raised. So if people want to ask questions, they should please raise their hands or make a comment. I'm just going to ask you to, if you were in a position to, if you are a president of Nigeria, if you are leading this country, or if you had the ears of the president, what kind of roadmap would you give to ensure prosperity in Nigeria. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Okay, so I believe that Nigeria has the resources that she needs to become prosperous, right? But I think the resources are placed in the wrong places. So for instance, we have had 4 non-functional refineries, because in government, you can afford to have a non-functioning refinery and spend money on it. No private company could have had 4 non-functional refineries for 20 years and be spending money on it. In that instance, simply placing that resource in the right hand would have created prosperity. We didn't. Now, the question is, what are the other refineries that we're sitting on today? What are the other refinery-like assets we're sitting on today? One of my favorite examples is I say to people that you invest for rainy days. You don't eat the investment. You put money in investment assets so that when you need money, you can use it. You can draw down on it. We have made a lot of investment today. Now it is really raining. Nigeria needs to get out of those investments because it is lives that are at risk if we don't. So for instance, we have a very viable investment in Nigerian liquefied natural gas. And everybody think, oh, that is a golden goose. But the point is that the man who is starving has no interest in his own share of that golden goose. He wants it now. So we should be considering reordering our priorities. We should be considering getting out of assets that were not designed for social outcomes and using the proceeds of that, first and foremost, to fix our currency instability. And that means, for instance, that we have far too much money supply, that the Naira in circulation is far too much, and that you need to begin to control Naira in supply. And the way to do that is to exit foreign currency denominated assets, sell that to meet the needs of people, especially factories that need this FX to continue to produce and employ, and then use that to mop up the Naira from the system so you can stabilize. So the first thing is that reorder your balance sheet. Forget about going to others to borrow. First and foremost, the things that you have internally that can generate the liquidity that you need, focus on that. The second thing then is that you have to rebuild trust. You have to rebuild trust. The first step for a government in Nigeria to rebuild trust today is to create transparency. As much as we're all unhappy when we saw the published account of the central bank, at the heart of it, we're also glad that finally we have the information we need and we understand the circumstances. To rebuild trust, you have to bring in transparency across all government agencies, across all ministries. People, we need to communicate a lot more about what we do, why we do it. And that is an important second phase. The third phase for me is that the same amount of respect that we show to foreign investors that we travel around the world looking for, we need to understand that the Nigerian investor is fast becoming an international investor. That is why foreign currency and foreign exchange rate continue to feature in all of our conversations. By becoming an international investor, if we do not treat the local investor well, anything we're getting from foreign investors coming in, they're taking theirs out. So we need to treat our local investors, the people who create employment, who create output, with the same respect that we treat foreign investors. Because again, there's no foreign investor that is coming into this country that doesn't sit down with a local investor to get feedback, to get a sense of what is happening on the front line. So again, these are simple things on the economic front that are important. But in terms of specific action plan, we've got only 2 million Nigerians, 2.3 million probably, that are currently in institutions of higher learning. That's about 1% of our population. We need to increase that number to 5%. So there should be a significant focus on institutions of higher learning, not universities necessarily, but post-secondary school learning, where we focus on skills, especially the skills for the future economy, so that we can begin to then replace those who have had to leave the country, who have jackpot, but more importantly, so that we start to create a workforce that can sit down in Nigeria here and earn from the global value chain and earn while living locally, so that they earn money from the international economy and they consume it or they spend it in the local economy. And when you look at that, it then starts to create local demand. And then that's how you create jobs. That's how you create a higher per capita income.
Okay, thank you very, very much. I'll just open the floor to those who may have questions at this point in time. I think we have Alex, Arije, Tola Obiemi, and Auntie Professor Nike Nike Grange, and Leke Olagbami. I think we'll take those 4 questions at this time. And I don't know if Sonny has something he wants to chip in at this time. So please unmute yourself, Alex, Arije, Tola, and then Tola will come after you. No, let's take 4 questions first, and then we can take another round of 4 also. Alex?
Yes, sir. Good afternoon. My name is Alex. Thank you for organizing this forum so nice. And I'm enjoying Mr. Suleiman. I love the way you present everything so eloquent. My question is, when I was listening to Professor Afe Babalola about a week ago or something like that, he was talking about the remake of Constitution of Nigeria. So what do you think about that? Because the concept we are using right now look like something wrong with it somewhere. That people are not, they don't trust that the constitution, nothing constitution or something like that. You know, can you please talk about it?
Okay, thank you very much, Alex. Tola, can we have your question, please? We'll take this round of 4 and then get Abu to respond.
Good evening, Mr. Abu. I want to ask you, based on your knowledge and what you said this evening, this present administration, they have reputable economic team. That's my opinion. We have Mr. Edum, we have Yemi, we have Zach and all that. Do you think that they are powerful enough to make changes within the next 4 years? What's your honest opinion about this economic team? Do you think they can make changes in the next 4 years?
Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Tola. Auntie, Professor Nike Grange, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Suleiman. That was a really good expose. I do believe that, you know, as usual, we agree with you totally about your analysis, etc. And in fact, I have had some experience in some of those areas. The fact that we have to give up certain things. Take time, for example. I don't agree with you that we need to think in terms of taking a long time now, because so many countries have succeeded in reaching where we want to reach. And so we should be able to learn from them. We should be able to piggyback on their own experiences. And so I would like your comments on that. Certainly, building the skills of the young ones is very important. But beyond that, we do not have the environment for making use of those skills. How do we, you know, how can we match the two at the same time? I believe that we really are, you know, we are not working in concert with what should be our ideology. Thirdly, just the last one now. What about diasporans? Unfortunately, so many things have happened that have sent most of our expats abroad. Many of them do want to come home, but many of them want to invest from where they are. But they don't feel comfortable because they really cannot contribute to the choice, to making choice of leaders. They are not giving the vote. So how do we, you know, get this done? If I mean, if they can get the vote, I'm sure many more of them will be able to contribute more. So let me leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof.
Thank you very much. I don't know if there was one more person. Make your lag by me, please.
Yeah.
Yes, good evening. I will say a very big thank you to Mr. Sulaiman for a very lovely presentation on the topic at hand. Prosperity, can we afford it? But my question basically is, you have looked at politics, governance, and other areas which can shape the prosperity of Nigeria. My question is this: what roles or how do you think the banks, which you professionally represent, can help in shaping the prosperity of Nigeria, especially with access to more funding for businesses and ideas, and probably checking the high interest rates, which is in double digits? I believe if we can have your idea on this, we can be thinking of how to really shape Nigerian prosperity from the financial sector. Thank you. That's my question.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lagwami.
Thank you, Leke. Abu, let
I will start again.
Take a bite.
Alex Arije, my answer is that the Constitution is a living document. Every Constitution starts very defective, precisely because people cannot anticipate everything that will go into a Constitution. But there's a process for us to fix it. There's been a lot of changes. It's not the same Constitution that we started with that we have now. A lot of acts of parliament have come in that have then altered the way we are constituted. And so my advice is that let us recognize that the National Assembly exists to make these changes. And a lot of very good changes have come out of the National Assembly. Despite every other fight that I have with the National Assembly, some of the laws that have passed are actually quite groundbreaking. You know, we eventually passed the Petroleum Industry Act. We eventually, there's an education student loan act that's going, on now. We obviously, the Constitution is changing, but you have to decide what you want to see change in the Constitution, and you have to mobilize to change it. Otherwise, it remains the same. The question from Tola Obiemi is interesting. Can this team make the changes that is required? The economic, I agree with you. I know the gentlemen that you referenced. These are incredibly brilliant people. But we've never lacked brilliant people or brilliant economists in any of our government. I don't remember the last time there was a Nigerian government that would say is lacking in very smart people. I think it always comes down to, can they pay the price of the changes they want to see in the next 4 years? Can they pay the price? And sometimes that price is you risk re-election. The price is almost always political or social, but you cannot make the kind of dramatic changes that this country calls for, and there will be no price to be paid. What price are they willing to pay? What price is their principal willing to pay to see to deliver the changes that they have committed to us? So it comes down to the original question again. Are we willing to pay for what we want, or do we just want it, but we don't want to pay the price? Professor Grange, thank you very much. Your question is quite hefty, but I will try and lift it. Start with a joke. Marriages have been around for centuries, longer than that, but divorces are increasing. So despite the fact that other people have gone through the journey before you, it doesn't always offer you an opportunity to do it differently or do it faster, because the nature of nation building is so dynamic. The challenges of building a nation in 2023 is so different from 1960, so different from 1910. It doesn't mean we cannot learn from them. Of course, we can learn from them, and we must learn from them. And in fact, we are learning from them. How else did we move from 300,000 landline to 150 to 200 million mobile phone in a decade and a half or 2 decades? That is learning from them. The same way we are learning from them in technology. So I agree with you, we must learn, and in politics, we must learn. But we are human beings, and human beings have to have their experience. There's just no way. I wish that there was a way to get a human being to skip the experiences that they must have, but they don't do that. Humans, unfortunately, are stubborn in insisting that they must see for themselves. We don't necessarily have the best environment, but I think that, as has been demonstrated by a few industries where individuals were just relentless, despite the challenges of the environment, if you place the right amount of skills here, the environment will evolve around them. Sometimes they'll create their own environment. Sometimes investment will come in and create the environment. You've got to, it's almost like a bait. What do you want to bait those who have capital with? Bait them with a highly, very educated and disciplined workforce, and they will come. And then sometimes, like I say, the sub-sovereign, the state governments are beginning to think clearly. There is a case of a state governor that went to a company that was providing outsourcing, effectively hiring Nigerians to work here and provide services to foreign companies in Japan and the US and so on and so forth, and said to the founder, what do you need to be in my state? And the founder says, this is the building, and the state made it available. So again, the environment will evolve if we do what we can around this. And the thing about the young people, once they have skills, are that you cannot stop them. You can't stop them. If you think, once people started to gain technology skills, you could not stop the fintech ecosystem that evolved in Yaba. Nobody went to pronounce Yaba a Silicon Valley. They just did it themselves. And finally, I would love to see the diaspora get the vote. I would love to see them get the vote. They have a unique insight into how things are done in other climes, and they would always be a major, major contributor to our development. But I also believe that even without the vote, if we gave them compelling opportunity to make money for themselves and their family, they would also come. And so we must do both. We must fight for them to have the vote, but we must continue to give them compelling business opportunity. And finally, to Leke Olagbami, I wish that the banks could control interest rate and not create more harm than good. And this is what I mean by that. If you find any economy where the interest rate is lower than inflation, that economy is in turmoil. That economy is not about to find its level. It's not about to grow. It's as simple as that. Because when inflation is higher than interest rate, people don't want to invest. People don't want to put their money when it will be worth less. That's one of the challenges we face today. Inflation is so high that we're not building capital. People don't want to leave their money in cash. To fix that, you have to go back to inflation. And what is the inflation problem we face today? First and foremost, it's a problem of money supply. Government is printing far more money into the system than the value we are creating. And so we create inflation, but also not just money supply, but also the specific nature of the money supply and how it is spent by the sovereign and the sub-sovereign. The way they spend the money also accelerates inflation. But there's also a matter of specific food inflation, which is the #1 enemy of Nigeria today. Any government that can bring food inflation to single digit will lay a solid foundation for economic growth. The problem with food inflation is it starts with the fact that there is productivity per capita. We still have ancient method of agriculture. We have very poor input. We have significant post-harvest losses because we don't have a way to process or to store them. We have unacceptably high middlemen margins, where people who have not participated in the agricultural process make far more money than those who are responsible for primary production. So there's a whole lot of work that needs to be done. And there's also a problem with transport and logistics, the cost of moving goods around, which explains the massive differences in prices of food in the cities versus the rural areas. These are the problems to solve. Interest rate is not your problem. Interest rate is simply an expression of so many other problems. So I would say that I would love for interest rate to be lower, but lower interest rate now will not solve our problem. We need to deal with inflation. I think that was the last question. Yes.
All right, Abu, thanks a lot. I think we still have a few hands, and I'm going to ask Pastor Sonny to continue the Q&A after this. Mrs. Adiola Aziz, and also Oluseyi Oluboba, okay, put up their hands. So let us take those two questions. I think there was a Femi Olowe as well. So Adiola Aziz first, Oluseyi Oluboba, then Femi Olowe, if he's still on the call. We'll take those questions. So, Adiola.
Yes, thank you very much. And Abubakar, it's good to see you here.
Thank you.
We've been on this journey together for a while, if I recall. Now, I want to steer the conversation in a different manner for you. And as you know, one of my core issues is how do we increase the participation of women in politics. And I retired in 2020. Coming from a political background, I knew exactly where I wanted to go to and why. The why was because, number one, I was tired of sitting on the fringes. I was tired of complaining. And I knew that I had the 3 C's, character, competency, and capacity, to make a difference, okay? I also knew that I had a deep network of colleagues in the corporate sector that would fund me. I wasn't afraid of resources. Now, I told myself, I went in, and the only reason why I ended up in a fringe party was simply because there was somebody who was already placed to take on that seat that I was contesting for. Because I was asked the question, why did you not go to the mainstream party? And the moment I realized that that was the case, I knew that I didn't want anyone to cut short my political ambition or dreams. So I basically had to reset. And in resetting, I went to a party that could, took me on hands-on. They embraced women, and they really gave me the support I needed. I ran the best race for that seat, the House of Rep seat for Ijebu Central Federal Constituency. It was clear, it was glaring. I did the best work. I did the politics. I played it the way it should. I relocated to the East, and I was out every single day. Now, why did I not win that election? Everybody said I was set to win. I should have won that election. I realized that, one, education of the electorate. I ran the day we had the presidential election and we had the senatorial election. And for those who were backing me up, they kept on saying, 2 women, 2 men, 1 woman. Okurimeji Obirikon. Now, the electorate were not educated enough to understand that the 2 men were my president, the presidency, and the Senate, and the woman was me. Because at every angle, it was, if you go to my constituency today, they will tell you that woman had no business losing the election. On the day of the election, what happened? Buying of votes. Secondly, I must also contest, the fringe party that I was with also were not strong on ground. They were not in all my my wards and my and all the wards. But having said that, right, the issue that I couldn't do was that I was contesting between the PDP, who was bringing out $10,000, and an APC, who was bringing another party, who was bringing out $5,000. I wasn't ready to buy the votes. They were calling me left, right, and center. Mrs. Aziz, you cannot go on like this. You must come out to win. So you must come out to bring funding to win. I had the funds, but I wasn't ready to go that route. It was against my moral compass. I couldn't do it. Now, the other issue was that if I went in, I wanted to encourage the women that we can go from being an elite, from the corporate sector, which I rose to the very heights of my profession to do, so that I will encourage other women to come on board. We've mentioned a lot of elites who have gone into politics, but are they still there? Or they did it, they got burnt and ran back. There was a wide rumor that Adair Revered Asue Godalo is meant to be going in for politics, whether it's true or not. I am praying that he goes in. If he goes in, I will be there in Edo State to vote for him, to campaign for him, right? But what do you have to say to the women on this platform, elsewhere? What can they do? Because I have put myself out to demonstrate that we can do it. I went in there untainted. I came out untainted. So all those issues that they say you go into politics to get dirty. Women who go there are not they're not what they saw. They're not educated enough. They're not all of that. I broke all those fallacies, all those things that would not normally happen. I wasn't afraid. I wasn't attacked. There wasn't any violence. I was well received. My likability index went through, and I demonstrated. I don't want to take up too much time because I knew the interventions that I also did there. It was glaring, and everybody tells me, congratulations you. And with the transparency you said, every penny that I used, I accounted for it. I gave an audit account, and I gave it to all my donors who gave me money, basically to walk the talk that this is what we need to do. How do you, or what will you tell my women, our women, elite women and elite men to come and stay and contest, not go for appointed office, which is always the soft, easy way, shortcut. We must be there at the trenches. Thank you, Abu.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Adiola, and thank you for speaking from the heart. And even though you've focused that question on women, I think it's a question that everybody who wants to be untainted needs to address, and maybe Abu can throw some light. You know, because this issue of $4,000, $5,000, even if you can afford it, like you said, and you have a bit of a conscience, then you have a problem. But the truth of the matter is that most good people can't afford it, even from donor funds. So we need to look at that very critically. Oluseyi Oluboba, do you have a question or a comment very quickly?
Thank you. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much, Mr. Sulaiman, for the presentation. I guess we most often than not overrated, even the politicians, especially with the money and the power of money. Not that it's not important or not that it doesn't play well. It is the fact that if we get most of the elite to participate in the political process, in the political parties themselves, the choice of candidates, it will be difficult for anybody to just buy up everybody. I think it is going to be critical for us to do that until the question will be, how can we mobilize the elites, basically, not, to decide to participate in those processes during some of these elections, in those areas where people are consciously aware. It is difficult for elections to be manipulated. When you go to places like BGC or whatever, it is difficult for you.
Okay, I think Femi's contribution has trailed off. Oluseyi's contribution has trailed off.
Okay, maybe you can just quickly respond to all those questions, and then, I don't know, Femi Olowe has showed up again, but it's gone off again. So maybe you can respond to those questions.
I'm here.
Okay, Femi, let me quickly respond, then we'll take you. Again, these are questions that I can't claim to have any real experience. So forgive me if my response is a bit theoretical. But I do think that politics is about interest. And I think if women want to begin to participate and win elections, they have to campaign more around their shared interest. Because I think even being a woman alone does not necessarily guarantee that your interest is aligned with another woman. So a good example is an elite has an interest that may be very different from someone in the rural area. So if you want women participation, you have to bring together women, or they already exist in associations and in groups, but try and highlight their common interest so that becomes an election agenda. As we speak, I can't think of any item that has been at the election debate or election agenda that has anything to do with women, right? So to that extent, there is almost no call to action for women. I think a call to action for women is important, but I also think that inserting political dimension into existing women organization is also important, so that they can begin to imagine who will serve their interests best, which would most likely be a woman. I could also be a man, but at least their interest is served. So that would be my answer to that. As to whether or not the vote purchasing, what do you do? I would say that we need to make sure that that vote purchasing is no longer sufficient to buy an election. I'm not saying it won't matter, it won't count. We need to work on making sure that it's no longer sufficient to buy an election. You're right, a lot of the women who came out to vote are not educated enough, but there are a lot of people who are educated who didn't come out to vote. And if you were at the polling station to vote and you know all the people that are part of your, I would say your group, you would be there to guide them. We all go to vote and we see people come out who are not quite sure what the voting process is. We show them where to line up. We show them that kind of participation by those who are educated and know the difference. We'll make sure that those who are not particularly educated will be aided so that they know exactly what they're doing. And so that's my advice. And this is not coming from someone who can claim to have actually been in an electoral process. So forgive me if it is not quite what you're hoping for. So I think we can take the next question now.
Right. I think we have a gentleman, Mr. Akinfakonda.
Okay, sir. Okay, sir.
Please go ahead.
Very brilliant presentation. The speaker did not address the fact that we have president, 36 state governors, 774 executive chairmen of local governments. These are cost centers to the system. And many people don't know, one ministry alone in agriculture in Nigeria, they have 11 departments in the headquarters. Each one has office in the 36 states. We are bleeding a lot. So what do we do about that? That's number one. Number two, will anybody clear the first order of paying 50 million to buy form to contest for governorship election? Will the honorable speaker be willing to use his own money to pay 50 million just to buy form, not anything else yet? Is that not a structural problem that drives people away? Thank you very much, sir.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. I would respond to this immediately by saying that we were not paying attention when these things were being inserted or when these policies were being made. The battleground was when I remember waking up one day and finding out that there's some law has been passed at the National Assembly that has major implication for me as a business, and I wasn't paying attention. I think we need to start paying attention as citizens to what is happening in the National Assembly, at the State Assembly. We're not paying attention. We're not fighting the right fight. We are fighting the wrong battles. We are fighting, it's not necessarily the wrong battle, but it shouldn't be the only battle. We are fighting the battle of replacing those who are, to some extent, mismanaging this country or who are managing it in a way that we don't approve of. That's the battle we fight, and it's a great fight. But the moment of, as long as they are still the one making policies and making changes and responsible, we must also fight the fight of making sure that they do the right thing. I don't see Nigerians aggregating, coming together to fight the battle of making sure that certain policies are passed. I have tremendous respect for the young Nigerians who fought the not too young to run battle, who came together and had that bill passed into law. The question is, when was the last time all of us collectively came together and sponsored a bill and got someone in the assembly to take the bill to the assembly, and we push for it? We have to fight. You have to mold your democracy. It doesn't matter that the president is not from your party. It doesn't matter that whether you like or dislike him. It matters that he's got the power to change the country, and you've got the influence, whether you like it or not, if you come together to impute into that change. And we have to do that, even if we're still fighting elections against the ruling party. The ruling party is ruling, and their ruling affects our lives, and we have to go and participate. So if you ask me today, even without going to election, if we keep our eye on every single bill that is passing through the National Assembly, and we make sure that we are there and we fight it, and where we disagree, we go out and we contest it, we will begin to remove some of these obnoxious items that have passed into law. And I think it's something we should do, and we can do that today. As for the cost of governance, unfortunately, I wish that I have an answer to that. I genuinely don't. But it also, the president and every president before this current president knew that that was something. He knows, and they knew that that was something that needed to change. But I have not found the one that has the courage to push for the changes required. So again, can the political class afford the cost of going for the right thing, for doing what is right by Nigeria? Can they risk losing election because they go after these institutions that are designed to effectively keep Nigeria poor? Somebody has to. Maybe someday we'll have the leader that has the courage. Just the same way we've had years of using petrol subsidy as a way to effectively drain the purse. And finally, we have some progress in that. But the truth of the matter is that anybody who goes back the last 20 years knows that far more Nigerians have suffered from us using petrol subsidy as an excuse not to deliver social services. Because once the subsidy was gone, we could then say there was no money left to deliver critical social services. Now that some of it has been removed, we have every right to now demand for those services, and we should demand for them.
All right, jolly good. We have some Jeff Johnson and a gentleman called by, I can't say his surname. We take those two questions, and then Sonny and Jumoke, I don't know if you have some comments or questions you want to take. Afolabi Ajidanwotu will take those three questions, one after the other, and then we can begin to draw the curtain with comments from Sonny and also Jumoke. Thank you.
Good evening, Pastor Itua. Thank you so much, and good evening, Mr. Suleiman. Adibo Ali Jeff Johnson is my name. I want to say again, just like everybody have said, well done for your speech and your line of thought. I, for one, also, just like Mrs. Adiola, also stepped out. I believe during the by-election for the Lagos East, I ran for Senate against Senator Abiru. And then finally, at this last election, I stepped out. And what I discovered also, just like Mr. Adiola, I also went first to SDP, again, based on my father's invitation, to step up there. And in getting out there, one of the things that I discovered is that most of the political parties in itself are run by very few number of people. And not to drop names, I know that one of the very key politicians in Nigeria controls 5 parties. And again, if I mention further, everybody will know what I'm talking about, but he controls 5 parties. And this, I can tell you categorically that when I was at the national office and meeting with 2 of the national executives,
Mr. Johnson?
so sorry, a call was coming in that disrupted the call. So at the national executives, I discovered that they actually have affiliates to this one man who was controlling all these other parties. So it was difficult to even see an headway to my candidacy. And so even when what played out, despite the primaries, I won the primaries clearly because people voted for me despite all of the funny stuff. The guy who was sent from Abuja to conduct the primaries insisted. And, the system was manipulated. And so I also share that same line of thought. And so I also believe this, and I would then ask my question at the end of this, my thought, that for us to actually take over this country, those of us who are genuinely willing to do the right thing, is for us to focus first on the legislative. And let us leave the executive for now. And if we must do anything, and I like also the line of thought that you're taking, that is not an immediate next election. I have been doing this. I've gone through two circles, one by-election and the main one. And so I know that if there is no by-election in Ikorodu Federal Constituency, because Labour Party that I joined at the end of the day wasn't on the ballot. If there is no re-election, if there's no by-election or the rerun of the election, that means the next election I'm going to be stepping up again. But you see, the most important thing for me, why I said that we should focus on the legislative, is that is where we make the laws. And like you said, sir, you woke up one day and a law has been passed that is going to affecting your business. And so, again, in sharing that thought, and the final position for me is, I will say, and I want to ask whether you agree with that, is that for us, well-meaning Nigerians who actually really want to make a change, should our focus be at the legislative? Just, I have said that's where my heart is, because if we can go there and make the right laws, we can at that place begin to change the narratives little by little. And so if we have the majority of us in that space, we might be able to do that. Number two, should we, not necessarily starting a political party, but should we be very intentional in taking a decision to go into one political party and take over the structure at the ward level? Because until we do that, candidates who are not meant to be will be selected for us, not elected, will be selected for us, and we won't have a choice at the end of the day than to be picking the best of the bad heads. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson.
Right. Bayo?
Floretta. Good evening,
Gloria.
sir. Yeah, thank you, sir.
Good.
Yes, sir. Okay. Thank you so much, Mr. Abubakar, for the very nice presentation that you've done, insightful and enlightening also. So my question is quite straight to the point and simple. My observation is that before the election that we had recently, the 2023 election, we'll see that I observed that there is what I call, systematic disenfranchisement, meaning that the majority of people who could, vote and make a change are systematically disallowed or disenfranchised. We hear cases of people going to not getting their voters card and all that, and it's really very difficult. I think it's so difficult for Nigerians to get voters card, even to go out and vote. Talk less of the scary electoral situations where people are killed and maimed, at the polling units and all that. And so my question is, how do we advocate, or how do we push, in practical terms, in practical ways, in ensuring that, if a majority of Nigerians, get voters card, and it shouldn't be that difficult, I think, for Nigerians to get voters card. And I would say that, if enough Nigerians had gotten their voters card as anticipated before the election, I think the results would have gone way differently. I don't know if you agree with me, but I'm just saying, how do we do that so that majority of Nigerians, if not all, but of the voting population, 60, 70%, 80% of Nigerians are able to get their voters card and, guarantee a safe way of voting? That's my question. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Femi Olowe, Afolabi Ajidan.
Okay, good evening, everybody, once again. Thank you, Mr. Sulaiman, for your presentation. I want to say that there are so many theories, correction theories in Nigeria. But then, at any point in time, if a reset button is pressed, depending on the type of set button that is pressed, some of these theories can be negated. I love the fact that you subtly talked about reform, constitutional reform, when you mentioned the devolution of power from central to state to local government. That's what we need, like you said. But I want to go out of the scope of today, or what you have talked about, asking about two questions. What are your views about it? The first one is, if you talk about reform, which is reorganizing the country such that we give we take power from central and devolve it to the state or regional, as the case may be. Do you think today that the current geographical demarcations we have, do you think it is correct and can absorb, or does it need to be changed or to be worked on? That is one. Then the second question is that what do you see about the population growth of Nigeria? How does it pose any risk to the country? Will you want to consider, if you have your way, will you want to consider birth control or population control, either for the entire country or certain parts of Nigeria? These are just my two concerns. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Let me take the question from Jeff Johnson alongside the question from Bayo, because they're both talking about the political space, and I will plead the fifth. I don't know enough to tell you what is best, but I agree on I agree with you on we are not doing enough in terms of focusing on the legislature. I agree with you 100%, not just for those who want to participate in politics, but also for those of us who want to influence policies. Not everyone is going to be in politics. If we have enough people interested in the legislature, then when you go into politics to contest for those offices, you have a far better chance of winning, because we know that that is an important office to focus on. Today, people don't think it's important, and so they don't really come out to vote. So I agree with you, and I think you have had real good experience. And I think your experience should be shared widely so that others who are thinking of going into the politics can choose. It's down to concentrating firepower so that we win somewhere and win big, instead of decentralizing our effort and then we don't see the true impact. But I defer to you when it comes to actual experience, and I take that your advice is that we should think about the legislature more seriously. As for voter disenfranchisement, I have this view that the moment I can find somebody else to hold responsible for any circumstances, I lose control of that circumstance. And so you're right, there were people who did their best to make sure others didn't get voters' cards. But also there were people who didn't do enough, because a lot of people waited until the last moment to try and get their voters' card. We all know now there's going to be an election in 2027. We know that. We know the exact dates. But I'm not seeing any conversation today around mobilizing people to make sure that they are ready to vote. This is where we missed the point. It's today. Election, the politics is today. It's too late in 2026. So if we're serious about helping our people to regain their franchise, we should talk now. We should push people now. We should encourage people today. Because if you go to collect your voter's card today, nobody's thinking about election. The political elites are busy, haven't won the election, doing what they do best. You can afford to galvanize people today to be ready to vote. And that's what we must do. Will it make a difference? It will absolutely make a difference, because a lot of the people who are educated tend to be the one that end up missing out voting because they usually don't activate themselves on time. We need to activate ourselves now. And all those that are around us. We also need to start influencing these people that we keep saying are not educated. They are all part of our sphere of influence. We need to start to educate them. And you'll be surprised at how educated a voter is in some part of this country. I know, for instance, that the average person who cannot read and write in the North, a lot of them have a lot of political education and they understand what they're doing. The problem is we're not engaging them, we're not speaking their language, we're not offering them alternative platforms. So let's not blame our lack of participation on their lack of education. So I think we could do that. But also remember, when it comes to vote suppression, one of the most advanced democracies is the United States. What they're doing with gerrymandering in that space is almost it's sinful. You need to take a look at the political map in some of those states, and you wonder if a child drew it. I mean, they will do anything to win election, and that's what politicians do. We have to understand that our job is not to change them, because we cannot change them. Our job is to make sure that whatever they do, we counter it with something that is superior. Do we need to change the current composition of the geopolitics for us to be able to decentralize? My answer is no. Any political structure, what we're seeking to do is to make it less complex. right? So there's a perfect combination that might come up. Yes, maybe some will say go back to the regional structure or not. But all of that, the objective is to make it a simpler and government that is closer to the people, and therefore is easier to hold accountable. That's the real objective, so that you don't keep pointing to the other person, the other side, the other tribe, the other religion. Your people hold you accountable because those excuses are taken off the table. So I would work with things as they are now and hopefully watch things evolve from there. But putting more resources in the hands of the state for me is exactly what we have to do now. And finally, population growth. The only birth control pill that is fair, equitable, and effective is called education. Any other one is us reintroducing some. We have to take away part of people's freedom to implement any other kind of birth control that they have not asked for. And so I don't know that we can practice our democracy the way we have structured it and be able to tell any adult what they do. But what we can do is, if we can keep girls in school much longer, it's a simple problem. Make sure that girls don't drop out of school until they are 20 or 21. And you can reduce the fertility from about 5.6 now to about 3.6, just simply making sure that girls don't drop out of school until they are 20, 21. It's that simple, 2 more years of being in school. And it changes the game completely. That means that collectively as a nation, we should put money behind making sure that those girls stay in school, even if we have to pay their parents. Keep the girls in school. The girls that stay in school till 2021, they don't have 5, 6 kids. It's just that simple. If you want to legislate it, I guarantee you that it is so politicized that we're not going to be able to move an inch. And so let's focus on the thing that matters. Put the power in the hands of the girls, and they alone can actually control the current fertility rate. Is the population itself, is it a risk? Absolutely, it's a risk. It's a major, major risk to our stability. One of the reasons why we remain capital poor today is that at this level of fertility, nobody saves. People don't save money when they have this number of children. Every dime they make is spent in either educating them, taking care of their health care, feeding them. So there is no savings. And without savings, you don't have investment. So you find yourself now relying on foreign investors, whereas if locals had been saving, locals would actually primarily be the one to invest in our prosperity. And you cannot, there are very few countries you can find in the world where their prosperity is not funded by local savings and local investment. And that is why I want the government to start to pay attention to those who save locally, to those who invest locally, because Nigerians are becoming internationalized. If you don't show them some respect, they will convert their capital and they will take it to other countries. And that is why the currency is under pressure. People taking their savings out of this country to put it where they will be shown some respect. And we need to think about that. You can exercise all the power possible, but you cannot prevent people either from jackpying and leaving the country or staying here, but ensuring that their capital is put in jurisdiction where they have more control.
Right. Thank you very much, Abu. Afolabi will take your questions, and I think we're done for today. And then I'll get Sonny and Jumoke to weigh in. Okay, Ralph, Bello, Fadile, I will have to take your question also. But we'll just take those two, and we will close for today. So, Falabi, go ahead.
Yeah. Sorry. Good evening. Sometime last year, a senator, former senator, came out and said that on the issue of corruption in Nigeria, banks are a leading problem. In the sense that, one, when you're elected as a senator, before you know it, all banks are knocking on your door, offering you all different sizes of loans of from 200 million upwards and everything. What is your salary that you're going to, even if you take this loan, what is your salary that you're going to be able to pay it back? And then he also said that on all these corruptions, on the contracts, when the contracts are issued, when payments come through the banks. So the banks themselves know where all these monies are. My question is that what are your thoughts and opinions on those issues? And my second question is, you touched on it a bit earlier. In any country, the thriving backbone of the economy is medium-sized, small-scale businesses. They, in Western world, developed countries, they can get loans at reasonable interest rates. Why is it so difficult, to the verge of almost impossibility, for small-scale businesses to get loans in Nigeria and at good interest rates? Why is it not banks cannot issue loans based on the collateral of your goods, of your inventory in Nigeria? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Mr. Ralph Bello.
Yes, sir. Beautiful presentation, articulates, direct. My question, where is the infrastructure to look inward, sir? Can you address that? Without power, good health, good road, good schools, how can we progress? How can we be Silicon of Africa when we do not have the infrastructure? In other words, where is the enabling environment? That's the issue I see. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Mr. Falabi, thank you for your question. I remember that, Senator. The first thing I'm going to do is to reference you to the people who have themselves been in politics here. They tell you politics is not cheap. And if you go and look at a lot of the people who are our senators, they are either people who are quite successful in business or successful in their private life or have held other position. So on the face of it, somebody seeking to bank them shouldn't be construed as enabling corruption. Because we have to remember the senators are the ones that are voted there to protect the public resources, not the person selling to them. So if a car dealer sold a car worth 100 million naira to someone who is a senator, is that person encouraging corruption? If a if somebody sold a house, it becomes very dangerous if our own elected officials start to push their responsibility to protect the public property and the public good under their care to commercial interests. That said, I would say that we also need to be reflective. Even though the contract is legitimate, the repayments that are coming comes from government, not by the banks. The banks don't put money in the accounts of the senators. The senators already receive those money and pay. So I would ask that anyone who has been voted in this country as a leader should please take responsibility for doing the job that they voted to do and stop looking for others to control them. I also like the comment about corruption and how when a contract is issued, the money goes to a bank. And the truth is that when contracts are issued, they go through an entire sequence of events, people legal in the government, sometimes if it's government, go to Federal Executive Council, all of the processes we've put in place for a contract has to be satisfied for the contract to be issued. Once that contract is issued, are we giving the obligation to the individual or the company or the bank or the contractor or the person that is going to sell input to go and look at those contracts and determine whether or not those contracts are fairly issued? I think we might be asking for something that we're not going to get because it's impossible. It doesn't mean that they are not financial institutions like every other institution that enable. They are journalists that enable corruption. We have people in the judiciary that enable corruption. We have lawyers that enable corruption. Every single sector you go, in a corrupt society, there is someone who has opted for the easier path by working with politicians. That's a given. And I don't think we're going to solve the problem by looking around and say, oh, somebody in one sector. Every single sector, even people who have committed their life to serving the cause for public good in religious institutions, sometimes compromise themselves. So I don't think that's the question to be asked because it's not going to lead us to an answer. The question to be asked is that the institution that we've set up to prevent corruption, is it working? And when corruption happens, the institution that is supposed to identify it and then prosecute it, is it working? And then when that works, are there going to be consequences? There's corruption everywhere. The thing that brings down corruption is consequences. And it's not the commercial partners that are going to introduce consequences into the government. It's got to be the institution for that. Even the public has a role, we have a role to play in forcing down corruption. So I'm unfortunate for the senator if he's waiting for the people on the street to come and tell senators not to be corrupt. I don't think that that's how it works. How SME and interest rate. So here's the thing. There is a graph from IFC that I wish I could share right now with the House that shows very clearly that we have a very odd graph when it comes to considering the micro businesses, the SMEs, and the large corporations. The graph is a camel shape for the developed countries. So you have a few micro businesses, you have a huge number of SMEs, and you have a few corporations. In Nigeria, it's the reverse. The majority of the businesses are micro businesses. And then you have the corporations. In the middle is almost flat. And I was talking to someone who came from the US government on a visit recently, and I said to him, businesses don't want to formalize. The SMEs don't want to formalize because the cost of becoming formal, which is what gives you access to credit, access to the formal financing system, is so high, but the reward from government is so low that they prefer not to formalize. And so for as long as businesses don't formalize, remember, banks have very little money of their own. Banks have your money and my money. And their job is to find a way to give that money to someone who will bring it back. And for them to do that, they have to know that person, the businesses the person is in. And the process for that knowledge is to formalize, register the company, audit your account, get independent views, have a governance. That's even SMEs have to have that minimum level of formalization. Otherwise, it's very difficult for them to access money. And for them to want to formalize, the government has to give them a reward for being formal. Right now, the moment you formalize, you get hit with all kinds of taxes and levies, but you don't get any support. And then the final level is down to the issue of interest rate, and I don't know if I can ever address that enough. If inflation is way higher than interest rate, that economy is in trouble because nobody wants to save. And if people don't save, there is no investment. And if there is no investment, you can't grow. So we are facing the wrong or backing up the wrong tree. It is not interest rate that is our problem. It is the inflationary effect that drives interest rates. And if you look at the way banking is structured today, the cost to a bank, even if you take money that you pay zero interest on, is above 10%, even if you're not paying interest to the owner of the money. Because you get the money and a certain percentage of that money you have to hold in your vault, you cannot spend because people come in and go and you have to pay them. And then a certain percentage of it, the central bank has said, bring it 32.5% and give it to the government. And we're not going to pay you anything for it. And then a certain percentage of it, they say, go and put it in our treasury bills, irrespective of the rate, because you have to have a liquidity ratio. So when you now see the percentage that you can lend, it is not significant enough for you to think you can lower the interest rate and break even. You will not break even. So the problem is not seated in the banking sector. It is seated in the lack of infrastructure, which takes me to Mr. Bello Fadile's question. For as long as the infrastructures are lacking, the cost of production is going to be high and productivity will be low. And for as long as productivity is this low, it's very difficult for inflation to come down. However, despite that, I still think that we have a chance to build an economy. And sometimes it is the building of that economy that forces infrastructure to come to play. I wish that the government would build the infrastructure first. But if we have to reverse that, like the young men and women who have dominated entertainment in this country without any infrastructure, like the young men and women who have dominated the tech space and have built incredible fintech that are now going global. If we have to do it that way, then let's do it that way, because we cannot fold our hands and wait. We will fight government, we will push government, but I think that a lot of subnational, a lot of state government understand how this thing works and they want to help. And we need to be able to come to terms with how we can work with state government instead of working with the center. So I hear you, infrastructure is important. I run a corporate or a private business or a private sector business, but we have 5 focus. We do 5 things well, and it's called the HAT. And the HAT of Sterling Bank, where HAT is for healthcare, the E is for education, the A is for agriculture, R is for renewable energy, and T is for transport. How did we end up with that? Because we realized that these are infrastructure gaps that the government is not going to be able to provide. And so if you figure out a private sector way to do it, not only will you be able to support national aspirations and growth, you'll also be able to create a profitable and sustainable business. So my point is that I want the government to do what the government is paid to do. But while I'm fighting that, while I'm waiting, I'm going to do what I can do to grow a profitable business, but at the same time, do it in a way that is impactful. Thank you.
Okay, and Jumoke,
yes,
your
sir.
question and closing remarks, please.
Thank you very much. Good evening, Mr. Suleiman. Thank you for joining us this evening. I have a couple of questions, and I just want to follow up on your on what you said about corruption. And I tend to look at the low-hanging fruits. Sterling Bank has over 3,000 professionals, and I'm sure if you add all the other staffs, you have quite a lot of staffs that you have influence over. Now, what is Sterling Bank's corporate responsibility to educating their employees on civil education and citizens engagement as part of nation building? That's one. And then the second question, I looked at your code of ethics and the way you conduct business is very impressive. Do you have that same requirement for your customers as well? Because where do the sources of income come from, right? If you have a customer, is there like a vetting process? Is there background check on those large depositors? So those are two of my questions, and then I have one more.
Okay, you want me to answer those first, or you?
Yes, please.
Okay, I did mention at the beginning, I think I mentioned the fact that a couple of years ago when the voters registration was reopened, we did run a campaign where we said we're sending our staff, we're sending our people home. And we actually gave every employee a day off with the sole purpose of making sure that they are registered and they have their cards. Right, so that's a practical step that we've taken to let people know that not only do we care about these things, we're willing to lose a day's worth of work. It wasn't deductible from their vacation. We gave them that day off to make sure they're registered. The second thing is that I am here talking about these issues, and I've done this relentlessly since I became the CEO. I take on national issues that are not of business value to me, that will not contribute to my bottom line, and I put my time and resource behind it. But also, if you look at how we spent our money on, in terms of what we do in terms of CSR, one of the things I'm proudest of is that for the last 4 or 5 years, we've sponsored the Ake Art and Book Festival. And people ask, why do I think it's important? It's because it's about storytelling. The way you influence people, the way you change people's behavior is to tell the stories that inspire them or frightens them. You know, you have to give people a reason to move, and sometimes it starts with the stories. And so we've encouraged that because we believe strongly that it will lead to something of value. So yes, we do what we can when it comes to our employees, but we lead by example. I think that the example that we've set in terms of our political engagement, for instance, today I serve as an advisor. I'm one of the committees that is advising on reforming tax and fiscal policy, because it's an area where I have competency. When I'm asked to serve, I go and I serve, and they see me serve, right? So, I mean, would it be nice if I'm the president? I think I would like that. But before that, I would like to today serve, contribute in the ways that I can. And a lot of our people have taken on this. In terms of code of conduct and how we vet our people, yes, we do have a process. We do have in our lending processes, in our, what we call the credit rules. Even before a credit is considered, there are certain considerations that relates to either the environmental suitability and all of that. But we also have KYC and KYCB on the individuals that we bank. That's recommended, is required by law, but we also do additional. And where there have been instances where we choose not to bank some people. There are subsectors today that are quite, I would say, profitable to bank in Nigeria, that are Sterling Bank we've opted not to bank. I mean, I don't want to demarket any sector, but there are sectors today that people are making a lot of money from that we will not touch. So we cannot try to, influence our customers as much as we can. And I think we've also tried to lead in the things that matter, especially when it comes to climate change. We have done a lot to drive renewable energy, and we'll continue to do that. So you said you do have a follow-up question, so I'll let you do that.
And so my follow-up question is also a sort of advertisement. We just recently completed a citizens' responsibility course at ALG, and we were quite surprised at how many people didn't have enough information about what their civil responsibility or their civic duties was to the country and their role in really I would say rebuilding. I use the word rebuilding Nigeria. And so that's why I'm posing this to you, where you are within your own sphere of influence, and these are some things you have control over. Would you, Sterling Bank, be open to having citizens' responsibility costs to its employees on your time to encourage that reorientation and the involvement? Because like you said, leadership has followers. And I guess one of our biggest problem in Nigeria is really the followership. So there's a need for us to begin to change the way we look at politics and the leaders and our role in that society. So is it something that Sterling Bank sees as part of their corporate citizenship to ensure that their employees are well educated about their civil responsibility? Because it's part of you're building the climate for your success as well. So that was my follow-up question. So I wanted to have that with you.
So we do have a platform for this. We call it the Sterling Leadership Series, where we've brought in a lot of influential Nigerians who are quite active in the civic space. So we brought in Professor Wole Soyinka, for instance, when we had the inaugural one. We brought in the former minister for telecommunication at some point, and some other private sector leaders. We've also brought in speakers from abroad. So what we've done is we've created our platform, and what we look for is people who will come in who have either themselves in government, in politics, in the civil society, who will then have conversations with us. And we have something similar to this. So that we do. Do I have courses that we send people on that is purely about civic? The answer is no. Would I be willing to introduce some of that into the conversations that we have? The answer is yes, we already do that.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome.
So I don't have any more
questions. Thank you very much. Any more questions, Jumoke?
No, sir, no more. And
I think you need to have further conversations with Abu so that he can also join our faculty on solar and so forth. I'm sure he'll be able to. And also his chairman, Mr. Aswe Gadalo, should join our faculty on solar too. He takes a course in LBS on governance and things like that. Abu, I have one question for you, and then I'll let you go. Are you going to run for office?
So my belief is that you need to make sure you finish one meal before you start talking about the next one. So the food in front of me right now, it deserves my full attention. But I do intend to serve. I do intend to, once I'm done with this current job, whatever I do after this, God granting me good health, would have to be largely or entirely in the course of public service in some form. So that is a commitment that I've made to myself. Would that require, or that entail me standing for elective office? I do not know. I have to be honest with myself. I have not built the political infrastructure to stand for election. I also do not think that sometimes standing for office is the best way for some of us. There's some of us that may actually be able to enable others stand for office. We talked about building and bringing people together. We could also be the bridge. I consider myself as someone who can be the bridge to bring the various people who are trying to make a difference together, and so make it possible for them to succeed. So, am I going to be the striker, the midfielder, or the defender in the political battle? I don't know, but I'll be a player on that pitch.
Okay, we look forward to that day. Honestly, we really need very, very good and well-meaning, sincere people of competence in Nigeria. I think that is the only way we can ramp up this entire conversation to be part of leadership. And when the time comes, I will be knocking on your door to put your heart in one way or the other. God giving us life. But let me say, I thank you very, very much for coming. Thank you for your candid opinions and your thoughts. Thank you for this fresh perspective that you introduced. I'm sure our people have generally had a very, very good time and they've learned a lot. If there are any other questions that appear on the platform, we will send them to you by WhatsApp or email so that you can respond to them. And then we will be tapping on you to do one or two things with us, part of which is our school for governance, and also maybe further discourses along these areas here and there. Okay, thank you so much. God bless you and have a wonderful evening.
And thank you for hosting this. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. All right, thank you very much, viewers. We've had a really good conversation with
thank you,
Abu Suleiman, the MD of Sterling Bank. I want to thank all those who were on the platform, and I want to wish you a very pleasant evening. Babami Tosa, I saw you on the platform. Nice to see you, Mr. Pampa. God bless you all. Jumoke, thanks a lot. Give Sonny my love. I don't know what happened to him. I got your note. I wish him very well. Tunde Adelako, thank you. Cedric, thank you.
Pastor.
Thank you. They say you don't want to talk today.
No, it's okay. I'm fine.
Yeah, fine. Okay, all right.
No very fine. We'll be connecting with him more later so that we can talk about our School of Governance and see how we can work together.
No wahala, no wahala. Just ping me when you're ready.
I will. No, nice to see you again.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time. For brilliant
Thank you.
presentation. Really
thank you
appreciate
for your time.
No, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
And congratulations to all the graduates of Solar. God bless you all.
Thank you. Jumoke, hi.
Good evening, ma.
Okay.
Well done, Able Pastor. Thank you, Speaker.
Take care.
Okay. Good evening, everybody. Good night, everybody. Sister Jumoke.
Good evening, Jumoke,
Uncle Falabi.
Well done,
Sister Jumoke. You and I will need to talk. Okay.
We need to.
Yes, so
I haven't been seeing your food.
Pastor, you are relaxing there.
God bless you. I'm taking life easy.
Yeah, I can. Let me come and join you. Pastor, let me come and be your special chief of staff.
Okay, no problem. You know, I can rely on you anytime you're ready.
Okay, God bless you. God bless everybody.
Good evening, Pastor.
And wonderful weekend.
God bless you all.
Tolu, good evening, ma.
Good evening, Pastor Sodi.
Good evening, Auntie. How are you?
Good morning, Jumoke. It's good morning here.
It's morning. I keep forgetting. Yeah, it's
for
good
us.
Morning. It's morning for us.
Morning. Yeah, see you later.
I'll see you later. Yes.
Okay.
Mrs. Jumoke, please
Hi,
share.
Everybody.
I just responded with the link to you.
Okay,
I replied to
I'll
your
look.
chat.
Okay.
AAA, I replied to your chat with the link to the YouTube channel where you can see this recording.
I can't see the chat.
Please, can I have the YouTube link as well?
Auntie, I'll send it to you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, our team. Well done. You are doing wonderful work. We have become a voice to be reckoned with in Nigeria. Thank you, PI, for your vision.
And around
Thank
the world.
you, my dear. Mama, California.
I will soon be back.
No problem. We are missing you. But
Thank you. I know.
Yes,
Okay. Agbo.
It's all right.
Say
Give him my
thank you
love.
to Auntie Jumoke too for getting in touch.
Yes, I blew your cover. I told her you were in her.
you really blew my cover. That's okay. We'll see later. Bye.
All
Have
right.
a good evening and a good weekend
Have
to
a good
everybody.
evening. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay, bye-bye. Okay.
bye.
Who asked him one difficult question that he was trying to defend banks?
Well done, Able President.
God bless you all. Thank you so much.
Killing it. Once you go now, begin to concentrate on. So once you leave, I'll begin to concentrate on finishing, on doing some.
Well, all your cleaning is done, your bathroom is done, your pins, everything, fits, they're all done. All right, now.
Thank you.
The only thing I don't know about is your Hoover, and I can't let it go to
No, that's okay. If you
I
place
get
it.
I get it tomorrow anyway.
Okay. Yeah. What time do you start tomorrow?
7 o'clock. Same, 10 hours now.